Today is quiet quitting day. No, I am not quitting, nor am I likely to be quiet. If I was quiet, I would be a mime. Nobody likes mimes. They're just creepy stealth clowns. Why is the communications guy talking about quiet quitting? Isn't it more an HR issue or a performance management issue? No, because it's not an issue. Quiet quitting is only a symptom, and it's a symptom of communication breakdown. That's why I want to put the lens of communication on this issue so that we can have a better understanding of what's happening and therefore be able to deal with it more effectively. Let's start by talking about the phrase itself, the name, the label, the moniker that's striking fear into executives all around the planet. Quiet quitting. Ooh, quiet quitting. This is something that's only come about in the last few months. According to an article in The Atlantic, the first instance of quiet quitting showing up in publication is about 2 months ago. And the issue itself, however, is much, much older than that. So quiet quitting, the practice of showing up on time, of doing your job sort of, so that you can collect a paycheck and hopefully hang on to your position for another day or week or month, and not doing anything beyond that. This work practice was previously known as work to rule, or mailing it in, or any one of, I'm sure, hundreds of other monikers, because this is a practice that has been going on for eons. Only now we have identified it as quiet quitting. We've given it a new label because times change, language changes with the times, and now here we are faced with quiet quitting. I want to take issue with the label itself, with the phrase itself to begin with, because I think it's dangerous to keep supporting this idea that there are people out there quitting quietly. Remember that quitting is a really final and definitive act. This is the act of someone that really couldn't care less, is never going to give you anything more, and it does not matter to them what happens. That's a terrible lens to be putting on people if they are not intending that to be your perception. So that label is dangerous enough that we might start using it on people who are not quitting, but are merely behaving in a way that perhaps we don't understand and that we might even be able to leverage to huge advantage. So let's look at the kinds of behaviors that might be perceived as falling under the quiet quitting label. They're basically employees that might be seen as partaking of this behavior are in one of four categories. So first being someone who is actually not really caring if the job is there the next day. They're there because they got no place better to go and they need a paycheck, and so what? These are people that could rightly be termed quiet quitting. What is their behavior telling us? Behavior is communication. Most behaviors can be interpreted as communication. So what's their behavior telling us? They're saying, I really just don't care. I'm really just not energized. I'm never going to give you anything more. And I'm just not that interested in being here. Those people, probably could be labeled as quiet quitters. The second group would be people who show up, do the job to a level that provides reasonable value for the company, and they have a decent attitude, and they go home at the end of the day, but they don't put in a whole bunch of extra effort because their fulfillment and their personal satisfaction comes from outside of work, and that's where they reserve their energies for. These people are not saying I'm dissatisfied with the job. They're saying I'm really happy with this arrangement because I get to go from work to someplace that's really important to me and do something that's really important to me. And I'm okay with that if you're okay with that. And as long as both sides agree to that, then that's a really good and equitable and beneficial relationship. The third type of employee that might be perceived as quiet quitting is somebody who's verging on burnout. Somebody who has been there for long enough or gone through enough circumstances at work or personally that their energies have been depleted over time and they simply don't have anything more to give, and now they're on the verge of being of working to their own detriment. And they may be plugging along and keeping their head down and being productive, but if they're doing so and they're at their cost of their own happiness and their own personal fulfillment and balance, then they're no longer really being an advantage to the organization or to themselves. If left unattended to, these are the people that will suddenly be absent from your roster because they cannot give you anything else. And that's really to the detriment of the organization, because these are people that typically are working at a very high level and making a high level contribution, but will not have any control over how they remove themselves from that situation, because eventually their body or their psyche is just going to shut them down and say, you can't go into work today, you can't do it anymore. These are people that can be helped so easily through discussion and engagement and the identification of the threat that they're operating under, and both parties, the employer and the employee, agreeing to some sort of strategy that they're going to implement to help address it. Not only does that help elevate their performance, but what a great way to show that you think somebody is a human being and that they're worth working with and they're worth making an investment in. I want to talk more about that later, because that says volumes about the organization that has that attitude. The fourth type of employee that could be perceived as participating in a quiet quitting type behavior are the ones that are the real gems undiscovered in your organization. And that could literally be your very finest employees if we pay the right attention to them in the right way. These are the people that come in. Usually these are folks that have been there for a year or two, and they come in gangbusters and they're really anxious to do a good job, and they're putting in the effort and they're taking on all the tasks and they're throwing themselves into everything that they do with great abandon. And then after a while they abandon their great abandon because they forget why it is they were doing it. They forget why they were putting in all the extra effort. They've lost track of what it is that they were trying to get out of things, or they have not perceived from the employer that anybody notices that they're putting in the extra effort or that they're going to get anywhere for it. So after a while, they start sort of pulling back some of their effort because it's costing them, but they're not seeing any benefit out of it. Granted, we have to give an employee time to develop, and they have to give time for the organization to make room or find room or grow enough that they can move into the new positions. But that really doesn't matter when they come in and sit down at their desk. What matters then is what's in front of them, how much satisfaction they're getting from it, where it leads them, and if it only leads them to go home with a paycheck at the end of the day, then that's the sort of effort that they're going to pare back to. Part of what this employee requires is the constant nourishment of, here's where you fit, here's where we might go together, because they lose sight of that, and then the only thing they can come up with is, I need to go to work to get a paycheck to look after myself and my family. These are the employees that if we engage them in the right way at the right time, we will elevate their game to such a point that they will be the stars. They will be the game changers in the organization. So there are the four types of employees that might be perceived as participating in quiet quitting. They are only one side of the equation. It is a communication issue. Communication is two ways, and it's all equal and bilateral. So there's no point just looking at one side, because on the other side is the employer. So let's have a quick think about how things are for the employer and how their behaviors can be perceived as communication by the employee. Think about the typical onboarding process. We come in, we sit down across from each other, employee and employer. We go through all the documentation. We say, this are the roles and responsibilities. Here are your duties. These are your lines of reporting. These are your hours of work. This is your management. This is the leadership team. Here's your team. Here's your desk. Here's whatever it is that you need to work with. And on the employee side, here is your salary package and your benefits and your holiday and all those details, and it all gets it gets everybody smiling, and we have a handshake, and all that information goes into a file that then goes to wherever it is in your organization that information goes to die, and it'll typically sit there for a year until it's time for the annual review, at which point we take it out and we open it up and review the information, and we sit down across from the employee and we say, so what's new? And what's new in that first year is they have learned so much and grown so much and have such a different perspective of the organization that you're not even sitting across from the same person that you hired 12 months ago. They have been subject to all the workaday pressures. They've seen the warts and all on the organization. They've heard the little voices that maybe are whispering and then the little negatives that tend to niggle away at people, to the point where their perspective, number one, is not what it was, and number two, is probably less positive than it was when they came in. And the reason that they are subject to that whittling away of the positivity is because the positive voices don't spend enough time or attention engaging with that person. You cannot sustain a hopeful and upbeat attitude without some sort of return. And yet, the return reasonably can only be expected after the employee has proven themselves and the organization has a time to create that position for them. In the interim, it falls on the employer to make sure that that employee is fully engaged and that they're not drifting and that they're on point and that they're constantly reminded, you have a place, you have a future, you have opportunity. We're seeing what you're doing. We're valuing what you're doing. Let's make sure that we're working on this to our mutual benefit. Think about what that kind of engagement and that kind of conversation says about the organization. It says, yeah, we're humans and we're really here for you, and this is a partnership, and it is not just an exchange of a paycheck for time. If you want career and opportunity, we want that for you too. Let's work together. Let's figure it out. Let's come up with a strategy that sees you, the employee, get where you need to be and gets us, the employer, where we need to be. And then let's work on it together, and let's stay in touch, and let's talk, and let's be engaged, and let's listen to each other. Not only does that behavior make a big difference to that one employee, but it sends a message all the way through the organization, ripple after ripple of people saying, hey, you know what? I went in and I was talking to leadership, and here's what they had to say, and it really made sense, and I said some things and they listened to me, and here's what's going to happen as a result. Those kinds of dialogues are the single best investment that you can make in resource development when it comes to your employees. Engage, listen. So here is I want to coin a phrase today too. Why not? I mean, if somebody can coin quiet quitting, we can coin our own phrase in response to that and in defense of that, because quiet quitting is a toxic attitude and it's a toxic sounding label. So here's my antithesis. No, here's my antidote. We'll say it's an antidote for quiet quitting. Loud listening. And I'm going to define loud listening as the behavior of attaching more importance to what's being said to you than what you are saying. Once again, loud listening, paying more attention to what's being said to us than to what we have to say. Elevating the value of the other person's contribution in the conversation is how we really turn communication into a bottom line contributor. Let people do what they do best by giving you all their best thinking, and that leads to their best performance. So, the cure to quiet quitting, loud listening. That's it. I've officially coined a phrase. You heard it here first. Do you ever wonder who coined the phrase to coin the phrase? Me either. That's all I got for you for today, except, of course, if you have a communication issue that you need help with, by all means reach out to us. We live for that stuff. And if you have a question or a comment or a suggestion for the video and the blog, by all means drop us a note. There's nothing we like better than continuing the conversation around the world's most important subject, so be part of that. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
It's the world's most